Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Maria Pio. I am the co-director at the Godwin-Ternbach Museum at Queens College, where I oversee administration and education programs such as this one. My co-director and curator, Louise Weinberg, is also joining us this evening. If you have not had a chance yet, I invite you after the program to visit our website at www.gtmuseum.org for a closer look at the current exhibition, as well as a virtual look into past exhibitions that we've done. And there you will also find some information about upcoming programs and events. I do want to take a moment to thank our donors and funders, including the Friends of the Godwin-Ternbach Museum, the Avery Arts Foundation, the Museum Association of New York, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the Kupferberg Center for the Arts, and Queens College. Without their support, we would not be able to bring this programming to you all this evening. Lastly, given that we're all together in this virtual space, I just want to go over a few reminders. So please remember to mute if you're not speaking. This helps reduce any of the background noises that we may have. And you can use the chat function to submit any questions, comments throughout the program. Afterwards, after this presentation, we'll have a little Q&A. So I do encourage you to submit any questions you may have. Of course, please remain courteous and respectful, and hateful language of any kind will not be tolerated. Tonight, I am very excited to welcome artist, illustrator, and fellow CUNY alum, Edel Rodriguez. I do want to start off by sharing just a little bit about Edel. Edel Rodriguez is a Cuban-American artist who has exhibited internationally with shows in Los Angeles, Toronto, New York, Dallas, Philadelphia, and Spain. Throughout his career, Rodriguez has received commissions to create artwork for numerous clients, including the New York Times, Time Magazine, The New Yorker, and many other publications and book publishers. Rodriguez's artwork is in the collections of a variety of institutions, including the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., as well as in numerous private collections. Inspired by personal history, religious rituals, politics, memory, and nostalgia, his bold, figurative works are an examination of identity, cultural displacement, and mortality. Rodriguez graduated with honors in painting from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York, and he's also a graduate of CUNY's Hunter College graduate program, where he received a Master of Fine Arts degree in painting. Edel, I am so happy to welcome you to this space, and I want to let you take it from here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to see everyone. I'm just going to go through a little introduction film that a friend of mine put together about my work that I think gives a little bit of idea of all the different kinds of work that I do and why. And then I'll be going through a slideshow, and then as things go along, if you guys have any questions, just note them down and we'll talk about them at the end. Let me share my screen here so you guys can see. My name is Edel Rodriguez. I'm an artist. I'm originally from Havana, Cuba. I grew up in a small town called El Gabriel, about an hour south of Havana. I came here during the Mariel boat lift in 1980.
The governor of Texas, Bill Clements, says the president has literally opened the floodgates, placing no limitations on the number of Cubans entering the United States.
The downside of it was really my family missing who we left behind. There was a lot of anxiety and angst about family. And at that time, we didn't really know when we would see them again. And that was scary and very difficult. And then I didn't return to Cuba until 1994. That was a big shock, because 14 years later, I arrived in Cuba and it was 10 times worse than how we had left. That's when it hit me, wow, my life really did change completely because my parents took this decision to leave. This is a series of actually Cuban science fiction books that I've been doing. So they're trying to introduce Cuban science fiction into the United States because Cuban science fiction does a lot of things where they hide and they talk about what's happening in society, but through science fiction. And they did that through the 80s and 90s. And it's getting picked up here in the United States. So they asked me to do the covers for it. I drew for fun as a kid, not that seriously, but when I arrived in the US, it became kind of like a communication tool sometimes. Like if I didn't know how to say something, I would draw it for my teacher or for someone in class. This is a map of the United States. So as you can see, Texas, Florida. So it's a map inside about 10 or 15 cigar boxes. I grew up with my grandfather smoking cigars, so I just like how that feels. I like the smell that comes from the boxes, and sometimes I use them for my artwork. And this was a map that I was asked to do by Amtrak. Coloring is something that I always had in my work that I think just came from my culture and my background. The colors that I used were very strong and very saturated. I never thought about it. That's just the way I see things. That's the way I do things. Studying fine arts, you're not told what to do. You're told you have to figure out what you want to paint. And then that's when you start thinking more about your identity, where you come from, where you might get ideas from. And that's when I started thinking more about Cuba and using it in my artwork. On my work, I'm very aggressive and very direct. I'm not going to sit back and just accept what's happening. I'm going to fight with what I have right now, which is my work.
You're looking at live pictures out of Charlottesville, Virginia. This is where violent clashes have broken out between white nationalists and counter-protests there.
You had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit.
This was most recently on the events in Charlottesville. I had shown him with a KKK hood in the past, and every time I did it, I'm like, am I going too far? Oh, let's see. But at this moment, I was like, no, that's it. He is a racist. I'm gonna put the hood on. And I sent it to the editor of Der Spiegel, and they agreed. And they called it the true face of Donald Trump. The same week, I was hired by Time magazine to do one on the same story. This image of a neo-Nazi with the American flag, this was all over the press as well. When it's on the cover of Time magazine, you have to talk about it. It sits on your coffee table at your family's house for a week. You see it on the newsstand. You have to talk to your kids about this when this shows up. So that's why I do strong covers, because I want people to have conversations, and that's the point of magazine covers, is to start conversations and get people to deal with the facts. When you're printing, you come up with some really fine prints, and those I sell to people that want to collect them, and then in the process you come up with really junky, and then these I put up on the streets. There's mistakes, all sorts of things that happen in the process. I'm always fascinated about how people deal with art in different contexts. So from a museum to a street to a magazine cover to a painting to online. I do things in the city and environments sometimes. I like the interaction. I like getting things out of the studio, and I like getting things off magazine covers and seeing how the world deals with it in a different format. These are all different venues that our work can be shown and shared. Once you go out to the street and you start putting up a poster, you're sometimes surrounded by people immediately, and you have live conversations about what you're doing.
Hey. Take your camera off.
Excuse me, if you ever have a photo
Take your
of me,
camera.
can you sign this poster for me?
Yeah,
I'm taking this.
all
I'm
right.
going to give it to a really good friend. Her name is Marcy Green. Thank you so much. These are pencils.
Give him a marker.
That's fun to me, and seeing how my work interacts with other things on the wall or with the environment.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just put it there like 2 hours ago. I'm gonna give you these two also. All right?
That is so fresh.
So I like to see what happens with my images once they get out. I'd definitely like to do more of that and see what happens when people kind of interact with them. We're here at Cooper Union, and this is an exhibit that I'm in called We the People. It's about the Constitution, and I was asked to create a poster on the 10th Amendment, and that's it, down there. So there's gonna be an opening here tonight. The current exhibit is put together by a design firm called Thought Matter. They asked these 10 designers to create a poster campaign. And it's sort of a visual way for people to learn about these amendments on the street, street posters.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, they have great space here.
Yeah. Both of your work
Thank you.
really make this come alive.
They pulled off randomly what amendment you were gonna do. And I was given the 10th Amendment. And graphically, for me, the X of 10 was very strong. So I like that image of the X, and I created hindsight of fighting, but they're also being tied down a bit. And the amendment states that anything that's not written in the Constitution goes back to the states or to the people. I have things inside of me that I'm trying to get out all the time. Trying to match what's in my head to what's on the paper, to me, is a really interesting challenge. If you're an artist, it's something that you're always going to be obsessed about. Years ago, someone asked me what I did for fun, and I said drawing. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, that's your soul," or that's you. And I said, "No, it's something that I made, and it's sort of a reflection of what's on my mind, but it's not totally what's really on my mind."
I'm going to go through a slideshow. First, some photographs of where I grew up. I'm from a very small town, and I spent a lot of time in my uncle's farm in Cuba. And I learned a lot of things there about, working. And my family would get up at 5 a.m. to start farming and things like that. But all these kinds of places and backgrounds end up in my work in one way or another. So that's why I wanted to show you a few pictures of my childhood. So yeah, that's me with my one of my uncles at the farm. On the right is me in my school uniform. So they would give us these red berets and bandana, and that's how we went to school every day. So at a very young age, you sort of start getting slowly indoctrinated in Cuba into you're a fighter for the revolution as a 5-year-old, as a 6-year-old. And they're basically building this kind of, system so that by the time you're 16 or 17, you have to serve in the military. So they're making these little patriots. They used to call us pioneers. So as a kid and as a young boy, you become fascinated by things like military, tanks and guns. On the left, I'm dressed up in my uncle's military uniform. This is the ceremony where they placed the red beret on you. And then my town is was surrounded by political propaganda posters. So things like socialism or death, homeland or death, and then posters. So this is the imagery they kind of grew up with. Here's my family at my grandfather's farm. I'm on the left there, and I think by now pretty much everybody in this picture is in the United States. So about half of us left on the boat lift in 1980. The two people that are next to me, they came here about 10 years ago, and they just brought their daughter over. So it's just this continuous drain of people from Cuba into the United States. When I came, it was the Mariel boat lift. These are some photographs from that boat I'm the little kid on the left in the red jacket, and on the right are me with my father, my mother, and my sister. Um, and it was about I think it went on for about 6 months. We left right at the beginning of it, in April of 1980, and it was a pretty sort of complicated time for us, and the way we left. I'm currently writing a book about this whole experience. Um, this is my sister here. It's just on the boat. These are photographs that I found many years later, about 15 years later, when I started working as a designer at Time magazine. I I got to know the photographer at Time, and one thing led to another, and one of the photographers comes up to me and says, "I think I've met you before." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Your eyes look familiar." So he says, "I was on the boat lift, and I left on a boat on May 1st, 1980." And I said, he was not on the boat, he was there covering the boat lift. And the government of Cuba told him he had to leave the country. He couldn't be there, covering the story. So he jumped on a boat, and it ended up being our boat that he rowed back to the United States on our boat. And that night he just spent it taking pictures of people. And he's the one that photographed my family in this on this boat, and he brought me all these photographs. So out of the blue, 15 years after I left Cuba, this man shows up with about 20 photographs of my family on the boat. And then more recently, I met through Facebook. I met another photographer who was also on that boat. It was a group of journalists that were thrown out, and so they just took a lot of photographs. And I found this photograph of me on the boat that he had taken. So overnight, I went from Cuba, communism, homeland or death, to Kiss and rock and roll and American graphics. So for a child, that's especially a child that's very interested in art and drawing and graphics, that's a very quick shift from one thing to the other. And I got into American culture, rock and roll. We started having parties at my family's house in Miami, where we'd all dress up like rock bands and things like that. So suddenly it was this American kind of pop culture graphics that I became fascinated by. And I believe that a lot of my work is sort of a mashup of those two things. Here I am in my freshman year at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. That's where I went to study. And this is my studio now. So, I still like a lot of stuff up on my walls. I'm still painting in boxes like I was when I was, 8 years old, putting on a Kiss concert. So I think that being an artist is trying to be an artist. You still have to keep that same mindset of an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, who just wants to paint things for no particular reason. And then once you make the thing, then you find a reason for it, as an adult. I don't try to think of where something's going to go first. I just go with my gut, do what I want to do, and then figure out if somebody wants to publish it or not. These are some of my paintings that I aside from my commissioned work, I'm constantly just painting, drawing, creating things. Sometimes the things that I come up in my studio find themselves into my published work. These are some other ones. I tend to think of I don't plan a career so much as I have a lot of friends that go, "Oh wow, your work is so diversified. You do so many different things. Isn't that bad for people don't know what they're going to get when they hire you?" And I'm like, well, I don't know. I just feel like doing this today. And that comes from the idea of freedom, the idea that I came to this country, or my parents brought me to this country, to be free to do what I want to do. And I really don't think too much about how my different directions affect my work or my career. I just go with whatever I want to do that day, and I think that's the best way to go about it. So all of those projects and things have developed into kind of an illustration career. A lot of the things that I work out in my studio end up being in posters, Broadway posters, opera posters, theater posters. So here's a collection of them from a show that I had in the Bronx. Here are some select images. My main goal with posters is to communicate, pretty much for anything, a magazine cover or a poster, is communicate clearly and directly, within 2, 3, 4 seconds, because I think that's where you grab the viewer. This is for Tosca. And most recently, I did the posters for The Tragedy of Macbeth, a movie that just came out by Joel Cohen. This is at Poster House in New York City on 23rd Street. I did the whole back of the bar for them, and it's there like on permanent display now. And the funny story is that it was supposed to be a piece of glass that broke. And 2 days before opening of the museum, they said, our glass backsplash broke. Can you do some posters? So I did this set of 3 posters, and they put it there, and it's still there like 4 years after. So if they give you an opportunity, just take it and work fast, and then it becomes, now they won't take it down because everybody's so used to it. These are some book covers that I've done for those authors that were doing the Cuban science fiction, and the series for Chinua Achebe books. I did about 10 book covers for his books. And the one in the middle is I have a funny story about that one, where my mom called me, like years ago, and she said, Edel, your nephew came home with your painting on a book cover. How did your painting get on that book? And I'm like, wow, they publish books, and they give them to the students, and they read the book. And she said, I still don't understand it. I saw that painting in your studio, and it's on a book now. So it's kind of interesting how I just kind of take things for granted, but I have to kind of explain it sometimes. But the thing I've gotten the most known for over the years is magazine covers. So I've done about 200 covers now for different magazines. Here are a few of them. I tend to get called for political, solutions to political issues, or graphic solutions to political issues. The one on the left is when Louis Vuitton, or when China was starting to become kind of a bit capitalist. So I put Mao in a Louis Vuitton suit, and Louis Vuitton, the company, was not very happy about that. So that caused some issues, but eventually it went away. And then the one on the right is where the day that they killed Osama bin Laden. I think I had about a day to finish that cover. Uh-oh. Locked.
Are you having trouble moving the slide?
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
What happened there? Okay. Here's the one for communication arts. It was a story on Cuban design, and when they called me, they were doing about 3 or 4 design stories inside, and they asked me if I wanted to do the cover. I said, yeah, I have an idea. And at the time, my family was asking for, in the past, they were always for medicines and food and things like that. And about years later in 2005, they were like, can we get iPod, and iPods and Nike sneakers? Like, what's happening in Cuba? The whole country was kind of changing into a more sort of capitalist system, and it is now. It's not really communism anymore. Here is one recent one. Was a cover about my work, and here it is animated. Yeah. So sometimes we do these little animated covers, especially now with the internet. You can do just about anything on a magazine cover. So when we get the chance, we do a bit of an animation to it. And this is a campaign I did criticizing what was happening with ISIS and going after how violent ISIS was back in 2014. And the images were pretty, extreme. And they got a lot of attention sort of on the internet. But it was the first time that I did kind of like an online campaign where I wasn't getting hired by a magazine. I was just putting things up almost every day. And then it went out to a street poster campaigns where, what I like about street posters is that you see how people interact with them. So the idea of it doing this is that there's this war going on, and then we weren't really paying attention to it. There's the war in Syria. And it, almost like this guy who was standing in front of this poster for about half an hour and not looking at the poster at all, just watching a movie. So I thought it said a lot about what was happening at the time. And then the extremism of ISIS, was in 2014. In 2015, when the American elections started coming around, I was starting to see a lot of the sort of extremism on every side. And when I would see these American patriots, supposedly, with guns at protests and doing all this kind of stuff, I'm like, well, we have kind of like an American ISIS happening in this country. So I just took all the ISIS images that I had done and started flipping the script and turning them into these white figures with little red hats. And that is one of the ways I work, is I don't really sit down and go, I'm going to rethink everything, when I'm going to start something. I sometimes think, what twist can I do on something else that I've already done that's something someone's familiar with? And I just do sort of a different take on it. And that's what I started doing, turning the ISIS thing into a sort of a Trump thing. Then in 2016, right in the middle of the elections, I get a call from Time Magazine. And I had been doing for about 4 or 5 months, I've been doing these critiques of Trump on the internet. And I was trying to get them on a magazine cover, but I felt like they were very far out there that no magazine would publish this stuff. But I had done it long enough on the internet and gotten enough of a following and people commenting, and they became a big deal. That Time Magazine, the art director, called me and he's like, I've been seeing what you've been doing on the internet with those Trump portraits. Can you do something like that for our cover? And I was like, I got them finally. They paid attention. So they called me and they were doing this a cover on Trump melting down during the campaign. And I created this cover for them, which became a pretty big sensation. It started getting shared all over the internet and internationally. I mean, it's probably been seen by billions of people now. So I created this one. Then a few months later, he had another scandal right before the election, and it looked like his campaign was in complete meltdown. So they called me back to do another, like sort of like a sequel, which I'd never done until then. I'd never done a sequel to a magazine cover. So I created this cover, and these covers landed everywhere on the television news. The woman on the left painted it on her fingernails, and sent me pictures on menu boards. So they got sort of into popular culture. And with the election coming up, I decided to do a street campaign of posters. These are all hand stenciled paintings, and I started putting them all over New York City, and including on the right. I went around midnight to the Trump Hotel downtown and just left one on the coffee table and got out of there pretty fast. But yeah, that's still one of my favorite photos. I took a set to Times Square, and I talked to these guys, and they're all from like Central America, the people underneath these costumes. So they wouldn't even charge me. They're like, yeah, sure, we'll hold it up. And then he finally got elected. And one of the first things he did when he started his presidency was the Muslim ban. I found the Muslim ban to be very, very insulting, and everything that the United States is not about. We're about, throughout the hundreds of years, is about welcoming immigrants of every race and religion, and for that to be his first legislation got me very angry. And there were a lot of people that were caught at the airport. That's what really bothered me. I'm an immigrant, and my idea, as you can see from the photos that I showed you before, is when I came here, we were welcomed with open arms, we were fed, we were really well taken care of. And that's what made me love America. And then when I see what they were doing to little children at the airport and grandmothers, it really offended me. So out of anger, I took one of the Muslim images, the ISIS images that I had, which was this ISIS guy cutting his own head off, to show how being extremist can really make you, you're basically kind of destroying yourself by being an extremist, because you're not going to go anywhere. And I took that same image and just put Trump's head on it and holding the Statue of Liberty. And I put it up on my Twitter account, and it just blew up, by a lot. It got really a lot of attention. And a few days later, I got a call from Der Spiegel magazine, and they said, we saw that thing on your Twitter account, that image that you made. Can we publish that on our cover? And I was like, wow, you guys really want to do this on a magazine cover? Like, yeah, we think it's really accurate, very good. Can we just change that tunic that he's wearing to a suit? And I said, okay. And I did it. I sent it there, and I told a few friends of mine, it's like, there's something coming out that's going to be a big deal. I'm never that confident, but I felt like this was going to be get a lot of attention. So this is the final cover that I sent them, the final image, and it published. It came out on a Friday at 6 p.m. just on the internet. It hadn't even been printed yet. It was just on the internet, published on Der Spiegel's site. And within 5 minutes, I got calls from the Washington Post, BuzzFeed News, the New York Times, all these places sort of quickly just, did you do this thing? Did you do this cover? I'm like, yes, I did that. Are you sure? Like, yeah, we're going to do an article. And then within minutes, articles started getting uploaded to the internet, and articles about me and all that kind of stuff. The next day, people had downloaded the image from the internet, and they started printing posters and taking them to anti-Trump protests, in New York City. This is one of them. This guy was in San Francisco and he sent me this picture. So people took magazine covers and turned them into political posters, something which I hadn't seen before. This was in Denver. So this image reverberated all over the place. I got called to do TV shows, from CNN to the Spanish shows and MSNBC, and a lot of articles were written about me. And the story started changing to, the magazine cover, and then it became from the magazine cover that is made by an immigrant. So it added even more weight to the criticism in that I was criticizing the president. And at the end of every news thing, when they shut off the cameras, Jorge Ramos from Univision just started asking me, are you okay? Are you gonna be all right? And I'm like, what do you mean, Jorge? It's like, I'm like, yeah, well, should I be afraid? He's like, well, you never know. And he said, just if anything happens, call me, if you have any issues with the president, or, I will do a follow-up. And that's when I started getting a little bit nervous. But to me, though, that kind of nervousness gets me more angry, because I go, why am I in the United States of America feeling like I should be scared or wondering whether or not I should be doing something? So that in itself makes me want to do more. And you will see that with some artists that do political art. The more they're oppressed, the more they want to work or create work about it. It happens a lot with Ai Weiwei's work. No one really stops him, This is a collection of all the magazine covers that I created for Der Spiegel at the time. This is a TV show in Germany. And then I'm getting a lot from nuts messages like this one: "Are you illegal?" Then that I'm a pathetic traitor to the United States for making magazine covers. So on the one hand, we say, we're the land of free speech and you can say whatever you want. And on the other hand, you have people doing these kinds of things. This was by the hundreds of messages and emails and things like that I started getting. So I just kept on doing more. So if you tell me, if you get on my case, I'm just gonna get even more in your face about it. So um, this was another one. This one actually, I had the idea and I drew it up, and I never sent it to Der Spiegel because I felt it was way over the line to call the president of the States basically an orangutan or something. So, but I had sent him. This was a year later, and I had sent him so many ideas, and he said, "Come on, I feel like you can be a little bit further. You can go a little bit further with this." And I said, "Well, I do have this idea." And when I sent it to him, he's like, "I love it. Let's run that one on the cover." One of the good things that I had in a partnership was the editor of Der Spiegel. You always have to have someone kind of defending your work or promoting it. And the editor, his name was Klaus. He was very adamant that Trump was a danger to the world. He really was very like, we have to confront this in a very strong way. And them having their history in Germany, he sort of like knew what was possible. And I, having my history of Cuba, knew what was possible and how propaganda can really distort things and all this. So anytime I did something, he's like, "Yeah, let's go, let's publish it." And he would have to defend it to his on his media channels. This is when Kim Jong Un or Kim Jong Il, I don't remember, and Trump were trying to figure out who had the greatest rockets. I was walking in the neighborhood and saw a little sign, the no pooping sign for dogs, and I saw Trump's face in it. So what happened was I just started seeing little Trump things and everything. I went to the supermarket and I saw some peaches, and then I got this idea of what if I made little stickers for the peaches. So it became kind of a branding campaign. I created sort of like an anti-brand where I could take those colors, the red, orange, yellow, and black, and kind of put it into anything and make a little commentary on it. Taking Goya's famous image and commenting on what he was doing to children at the border. And then a lot of these images started getting picked up by people. We had a lot of protests during the Trump administration. So people just started doing their own versions of posters, like hand done, and sending me photographs of them, either printed or hand painted. And I for an artist, it's awesome to see what people will do with your work as a template, and I encouraged it. I put it up on the internet and told people to go out. This is a show I had in Portland, which collected all of this work into an exhibit. This is a White and Kennedy, which is an ad agency there. And it's great when you get support from an ad agency, like they have their clients coming and their clients are rich and all this kind of stuff, but they felt it was important enough, or the work was important enough to give it, a show in the lobby. And they asked me, is there something you wanted to do you haven't had a chance to do yet? I said, yeah, I want to make a Trump piñata. And they're like, let's do it. We make things happen here. I'm like, all right. And they knew someone actually from Peru that made piñatas. So they hired her to create this Trump piñata. And then they're like, oh, what do we fill it with? I'm like, you got to fill it with Cheetos. So they went out and got like a ton of bags of Cheetos, and we filled the whole thing with Cheetos. And then at the end of the show, people started smashing the piñata, and all these orange Cheetos started coming out of it. And CNN got a whiff of it, and they put it on their website. That little kid was all over the floor picking up Cheetos. It was disgusting. Sometimes people ask me, have you had any problems? And the only problem I had was with this image. I posted this poster on the Lower East Side. And, as I was putting up more, some guys came around, like they just looked like local guys, in hoodies and stuff. And they're like, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm putting up posters, and they're like, oh, we're the police. And they were undercover cops. And they said, you can't put these posters up because this is private property. And they thought I was defacing private property. And I said, look at this wall. It's full of posters. How am I defacing this wall? And they said, you just can't paste posters here. And we got into some back and forth. And then at the end, they said, look, we're going to let you go, but can you just give us a few copies of those posters because they're very cool. So the police asked me for these posters, and they asked if I could sign them for them and everything so they could put it up in their precinct office. And I was like, okay, well, if the police are putting up Trump posters, then maybe we're not in a dictatorship yet. And then when Biden got elected, this was the sort of like the follow-up to the original Trump poster. And that also, got on the internet and TV channels and stuff. So that's all that Trump stuff. And then all that political work led to other projects. So U2, the band, liked what I was doing and liked how they're always very much about social justice and doing projects around that. So they asked me to create a whole set. I think I created about 50 posters that ended up being shown at the beginning of their shows. So this is at Madison Square Garden. I think this is another venue. This is in the middle of of them playing. They have this big billboard. It's hovers like over the audience. Created that, and all of these. This is a big set of posters there, and these are the individual posters. This is a series that I did for SVA. They wanted to do a series, and I said, why don't we do something about political involvement? So I created this whole series. It was a series of 3 posters that went all over the subway system. And more recently, I was asked to create a graphic for right in the middle of COVID. This is probably like in April of 2020, when Times Square was empty, and no one was buying advertisements. So the ad people said, well, if you guys want to do a campaign out here, they gave the space for free to the Poster House, and Poster House asked me to create a poster, and I created this one. And there it is in Times Square. And the idea to me is that the only people that were walking through Times Square were like doctors, police, and firefighters, because no one was going to work. So I wanted to do something like that communicated to them and says that said New York loves you for what they were doing. And it also went in all these art on linked NYC things throughout the city, on the NASDAQ billboard there. And the last project that I shared was in 2019. I was asked by WeTransfer, the place that where you send your files to people. They do kind of features on artists, and they said, is there anything you have wanted to do that haven't done yet? And I said, yeah, I want to go back to my hometown and paint for 2 weeks. Paint portraits of my family, of my friends that I grew up with. I've never taken the time to just sit there and paint. And this is so this is me at my in my neighbor's house on the porch, and I just sat there and painted people as they came by, and we wrote a whole story with it. They sent me with a reporter who's a friend of mine. She came down with me, so we spent about 2 weeks down in Cuba in 2019, and this is the result of that. These are all the drawings of my these are mostly family members. Yeah, Coco, Nancy's my aunt. It was my childhood, and and this is me painting my godmother in her garden, and painting my neighbor Nilda. And I feel like they're kind of forgotten, especially in these small towns in Cuba. No one's really writing about them or painting them or doing anything. So I wanted to do something special that would kind of bring them a little bit of dignity for everything that they, they work very hard, and the government there doesn't really like take care of the towns or anything. So I want to do kind of something kind of special for them. And at the end of the week that I was there, we had an exhibit. I put a show up on my aunt's porch. So this is the show up. Put up all the drawings. I did a little invitation and I sent it out to my friends and family to come to the opening and everything. So it was kind of fun. I hung them on the fence outside. This is my third grade teacher. Is the last teacher that I had in Cuba before I left. And every time I go back to Cuba, I go and talk to her, and this is her at the exhibit. And the last thing is, this is the project that I'm working on right now, which is it's a graphic novel memoir. So it's going to be about a 300-page illustrated memoir of basically everything that I've been talking about right now. Growing up in Cuba, coming to America, and then the challenges and issues that have come up as an immigrant here, and as an artist that speaks about what's happening in society. So a lot of the stories, and some of the stories I mentioned, and many more stories are going to be in this book. This is the work in progress. I'm about 3/4 of the way there. All right.
Thank you so much, Edel. That was really wonderful. I mean, if you have a quick moment just to look through the chat, because there are some really great comments. I mean, everyone here, I can speak for everyone, but I think we all really enjoyed hearing from you about these covers. And I think for me specifically, I've seen the covers, I've looked at your work, but hearing you actually talk about them in this way, you also laugh at it. It's not, they're serious, they're very, politically charged, but you also have this lightness to it that doesn't make it, you sort of really get the point across, because you talk about freedom and risk. So you're having this freedom to do this, but you're also, I'm sure, taking these risks in putting these images together. Have you ever felt like that you've been at risk anytime you're creating this? Do you ever feel like, maybe this will be too much, or maybe this will push the envelope a little too much, or does that go through your mind? And how do you walk back from that?
I think the lightness comes from my sort of my Cubanness. We just laugh at everything, in Cuba, and my family is like that. So, I mean, you'll go to a funeral and everybody's laughing in Miami. Like my entire family is just laughing. And I took my wife's American. She grew up in New Hampshire. Her family's Jewish, and she went to one funeral. And she's like, "Why is everybody having such a great time?" And like, we just laugh at the ridiculousness of things, or sadness, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I kind of see confrontation and laugh about it, because it is so ridiculous. Mm-hmm. It's sort of it doesn't make any sense. So we just kind of laugh about it. In Cuba, everything's a disaster, and everybody just laughs and goes, "Look at this, ha ha ha." So that's what I felt what was happening here in the United States with Trump. Everything was so ridiculous and so nutty that we were even discussing these things, or that I even had to make art about it, that it sort of brought out this, oh, I'm gonna mock it, incessantly now. Every day I'm gonna just knock on this guy because he's such a moron, but also a monster, Mm-hmm. So you do need, I think that the magic of connection is, you do need to have a bit of sense of humor in your work to connect to people, to make them laugh, so that they realize that I got a lot of messages from people going, "Man, thank you for what you do, and you're making me realize I'm not crazy." Mm-hmm. People just thought that, is this really happening? Am I crazy? Am I? Because Trump is a big gaslighter. It makes you think like that thing didn't really happen. So when you make an image, it confirms that the thing happened, because there's an image of it. That's what the images do. They go, okay, that marked that space in time. So like all these images that I showed you now, you can go back and go, that's when that happened. That's when that happened. That's when that happened. you can't deny an image. You can maybe deny words, or you can kind of like twist words around, but images are there and they're going to stay there forever. One of the things I wanted to do was create like a visual history of what happened during the Trump administration. And that's in the history books. It stays there. You go look up Trump on the internet. My covers are going to come up. I denied him, 15 to 20 magazine covers, which is what I really wanted to do. I didn't want him to look presidential on a magazine cover. So what a magazine cover does is that I used to work at Time Magazine, so I actually know a little bit about the system of how it works. They will go to the White House, and the magazines feel like they need to keep a certain connection with that president to get the access to the White House. So there's a bit of access in return for good coverage, Right. If a magazine gives the president good coverage, they're going to let you come into the White House to shoot it. If not, then they won't. And I said, well, what if you put him on the cover on his White House chair looking presidential? Everyone's going to think that he's the normal president. Right. And I didn't want him to be a normal president. So I just pushed. And I mean, I would, on my free time, I would just be sending magazines ideas. Like, I got this idea. Why don't you publish this? Why don't you publish this? Because I wanted the image of him to be my image of him, not the media's constructed image or the White House's constructed image. And I think I was able to succeed at that in a weird way, because if you think of Trump, you kind of think of these magazine covers, a lot of times. And am I ever about risk? Am I ever scared or things like that? Of course I am, there were many times during this whole thing where one time I was giving a lecture, and just a random guy came up asking if I was Edel Rodriguez. And I'm like, why? Why are you asking me? People recognize me in the street, even like I would go to a museum and like, are you Edel Rodriguez? And I'm like, why? Why are you asking this? And usually it was, thank you, thank you for what you're doing. But my first reaction is, what does this person want to do to me? When you get threats by email that are consistent, they find your email. It's not just, I even got phone calls. When they find you directly, you look out your window and you start checking things at night. Oh boy. And that's when I go, okay, this is really bad, because I'm wondering, what's that car out the window? Why is there a car outside my house for the last 2 hours? That really upsets me. I got an unmarked box on the porch. And I'm like, and I like kicked it a little bit, and eventually, and my wife's like, you got another box. Even now, I'll get an unmarked box, and my wife comes up for the post office. She's like, you got an unmarked box. Where's this from? And I was like, I don't know. And then I get a lot of boxes from book publishers. And when they don't put their name on it, I call them. I say, please, if you send me something again, just put your name on it. So those are the kind of things that living in the United States, you shouldn't have to wonder about these things, The other thing that's happened, that happened that I was surprised by, now it actually makes me a bit more upset, is that I was expecting at any moment something from the government, right? Like knock at your door, or not expecting, but wondering if it would happen, or some sort of like subtle threat from the Trump people. And that never came. But what the censorship that came to me was from more left-wing organizations, museums, and universities that were afraid to show my work because it might offend some people or some group in a weird, politically correct way. So they're all individual instances. So like the one where he's cutting the head of the Statue of Liberty was set to be shown at Northeastern University in an exhibit there that I got invited to, and they pulled it off. They pulled it out. They didn't want to show it. And I was like, why? Well, because we have little children that walk through the gallery and we don't want to, hurt them. I'm like, well, that seemed a little odd to me. So I sent them another image in place, and it was the Ku Klux Klan head with the red tie. And they didn't want to show that one either. I said, no, why is it that you don't want to show this one either? And they wouldn't give an explanation. Those are those instances. Then in the show I had in Portland, I wanted to show the KKK image very big, and they're like, we don't want to hurt any African Americans that come into the gallery with such a, it could trigger them. So we're going to move it and make it much smaller and put it in the back of the show. So these, I'm sort of, right now, I'm not on Instagram anymore. They took down my Instagram account because of an image I did of Trump from 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, Trump said, you could get rid of COVID with bleach, possibly with bleach, right? So I did a drawing of Trump drinking a giant bottle of Clorox bleach as a satire. That was 2 years ago. These people, Meta and Facebook, have said, we're going to look at everything we've done and we're going to start sort of like taking things down, etc. So just last week, I started getting these messages one after the other about an image that I posted 2 years ago. I was like, why am I getting these messages? And it was warning me about this Trump bleach image, and it was one after the other. And I racked up so many violations from 2 years ago that they just shut down my account without asking me any questions like, what is this? And it was because it had been so popular at the time. It was shared by so many people, like Snoop Dogg and other rappers shared my image. It became so viral that all that stuff counted against me, and they shut down my account. I'm in the middle of trying to see if I can retrieve it.
Wow.
And it is the reason that the things that they accused me, or not they accused me, but sent me a message, is that it goes against community guidelines against suicide, because they thought I was encouraging people to drink bleach.
Oh gosh.
Suicide and self-harm, and because of that, they're taking it down. So for me, the censorship has come from this overprotectiveness that images can cause, people to be hurt, people to, hurt themselves. And as an artist, what do you do? I've had people accuse me of re-victimizing a victim because I showed a victim in my drawings. Where say like a victim of war, showing a victim of war. I'm like, well, how do I make the point? How am I going to make the point about victims of war and getting you to empathize with victims? If I don't show someone maybe getting their head cut off or getting stabbed or getting raped or something, I need to kind of like work with imagery that is strong, that's going to have you that reaction. Right. But we're trying to protect people from reactions, because perhaps they've had trauma in their life and they don't want them to be re-traumatized. I'm like, that is in itself a certain form of censorship on art, because, you look at the Goya image where, he's Saturn, where he's eating his son. That could traumatize a kid, You look at Picasso or just historical images that like in your brain, they go, wow, that was such a powerful image. Why was it powerful? Because it shook you. So we can't shake people anymore. Because if you do, you could get banned from Facebook. It's not even, the funny thing is not just me getting banned. The people that shared my image have had their Facebook accounts shut down.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I'm getting messages every day from people going, hey, my Facebook account was shut down because I shared that image of Trump drinking Clorox from 2 years ago.
So that's very interesting, because actually I want to get to a question that we have in the chat, but I think this one, something that I had been thinking also about you as an artist, especially in this day and age, is thinking about what social media means to you and your art. And now hearing you say that, things are being banned from this, social media has such a wide reach, right? Where you've seen that happen, but now all of a sudden things are getting, taking a step back. I just think it's very interesting. And I wonder how this will continue on. And I wonder also, for you as an artist, what does that mean now? If Instagram, right, which again, one of the things for Instagram was just to really share images, right? Share photos, share your work. That's how this whole platform began. And now all of a sudden it's sort of, things are being taken down.
I think in general with things like that, what they don't account is censorship works in strange ways. It's not so much the censorship after the fact that is the most dangerous, is the self-censorship. that makes people go, why am I going to make that anyway?
Right.
It's going to get banned. Why am I going to post this? It could just get me in trouble. I've told this story to some of my friends, and they're like, oh, I better be careful what I put up. I don't want to, I don't want to cause trouble. And the causing trouble is because Instagram has become like a business thing for artists. You're selling your prints, you're showing your work to art directors, you're getting work through Instagram, and they've shut that down. They can, easily impact $20,000-$30,000 of income a year. So people just go, oh, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to post it. I don't want to get in trouble. And that's how censorship works. The more you kind of tamp down on something, then the mind, when I'm sitting here, go, I'm going to put him drinking Clorox, right? Dumb idea or crazy idea, but I'd like the audience to kind of decide whether it was funny or awful or not. But I might just go, okay, if I put that up, it's going to cause me trouble. It's going to cause my followers trouble who share it. So those are the kind of things that you're always measuring. And I've measured it in the past as, is this going to get me in trouble with the president of the United States, right? Like that, the one where I showed him as an orangutan. I just could think, or the KKK hood. I think, oh my God, that's really going to get me in trouble with the government or with some nutty right-wing person. Should I do that? Now I'm thinking, is it going to be a problem with Twitter, or is it going to be a problem, with Instagram or Facebook? Fortunately, for me, Twitter is still a place where all sorts of things are pretty open, and it's pretty hard to get banned from Twitter, although Trump was able to manage it.
I'll leave it to him. I do have a question I want to get to. So this one says, many people avoid political work for the negative attention it can bring. What was the spark that generated you interest in creating political work that analyzes society?
I think that the spark has always been that I felt there was a very big unfairness about the Cuban government and how I grew up. There was I grew up with my family feeling like we were as oppressed as anybody feels oppressed here or in Africa or in Asia or whatever. I don't think that people on the left in the United States understand that some people here, I found this in college. I had a lot of left-wing professors that defended the Cuban Revolution and thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And I always get into arguments with them because they don't understand how propaganda works in Cuba, how groups that come and threaten you work. People get beat up all the time in Cuba by government squads and things like that. So, and also when I left Cuba, there was a lot of things that happened. We were held in a detention camp for about a week, and there's a lot of violence in that detention camp. That was brought on people that just wanted to leave the island. So there was so much that, as an 8-year-old, so much of that unfairness. And then when we finally arrived here, my parents just talked about everything that they went through and other immigrants from Cuba. And that was always in my mind as a kid. So I became immediately interested in politics. Like, why did this happen? Why did we have to leave my grandparents? Why did I have to leave my best friends? What creates these things in life? So I got interested in politics as a teenager, and I started making political posters as a teenager. And then when I went to college, I got more interested in artists that dealt with these things, like Goya and Picasso. If you ask me my favorite painting, I would pick Guernica, because it really touches on everything that is important to me. And I always, whenever I saw a work of art, it was always those pieces that had a point of view or a political thing or a social justice aspect to it. I was not that much into Impressionism. I was more into like issues. So when I left college, I just approached, my portfolio already had a little bit of that kind of stuff, and I approached places like the New York Times, where was like my first client because they dealt with these things. So once I started working for those places, it just created more work in that environment.
Great. Thank you. There's one question here. Have you been audited?
No, everybody's always warned me that I was gonna get audited. As I said, I haven't. I mean, I was waiting. I was waiting for something, and people kept telling me, "You're gonna get audited. Watch, you're gonna get audited." And I was always waiting for something to happen like that, and nothing ever came. I mean, the closest thing that was felt weird to me was I got a letter from a lawyer that worked at the White House wanting to buy a print of my work. And I was like, this is a trap.
Yes.
Not. It was an email. He's like, hi, I'd like to, buy a print. And I think, he said in his letter that he worked at the White House, or it was somehow in the signature at the end or something. I was like, this is no, I'm not. So I didn't answer it. I didn't answer it. And then like a week later, he wrote back again. And I was like, this is creepy. No. And then he wrote back, I really love your work. I want to buy a print. And I finally wrote him back and I said, can you tell me which print you'd like to buy? And it was an image of me. That drawing that you saw at the beginning video of me on the boat with my family. And he wrote like this really nice letter. He's like, I'm a lawyer here. When I was a young man in the 1980s, 80s, 90s, I worked for the U.S. Coast Guard at the U.S. Coast Guard, and we saved a lot of Cuban refugees that were coming from Cuba into the United States. And I just love that image, and I'd like it to buy it for my living room. And I'm like, okay. And I said, I'll just send it to you for free. Thank you. I didn't want to charge him. I was like, we're good. So I sent them. But that's the kind of thing that these situations do, is they make you a little bit paranoid about like any social interaction with people. And it's really not good. What set me off during the Trump years, what really like sparked me in 2015, was that I was dropping off my daughter at the so just to go back a little bit, when I was a kid, my grandmother never said Trump's name. I mean, never said Fidel Castro's name. She was afraid to, because people would hear Fidel Castro, so you want to listen to what the next thing that's going to be said. So instead, she would rub her beard like this. She goes, because did that, or careful, is everyone's, is probably listening, and everybody got to know what she was talking about. So in 2015, I was dropping my daughter off at the school, which I'd done my entire life, morning routine, and I go there, and this other mom comes up to me and she goes, "Hey, I love what you're doing." I'm like, "Why are you talking so low?" Oh, because I don't want, what if, with everything that's going on, what if one of these teachers is a pro-Trumper, and I don't want it to affect my kids in school. I just wanted to let you know you're doing a great job. I'm like, you shouldn't talk to me like this. It creeps me out. It reminds me of my childhood. So that's when I went, oh my God, people in the United States are talking like they did in Cuba in a dictatorship.
Yeah.
Like this secretive, because you don't know who's listening. And that really got me angry, freaked out. And that's when I went, okay, I have to be really loud so that people looking at my images might feel more comfortable being loud themselves. If I'm up here going, then there's no secret. There's no, if Time Magazine puts this on their cover, it makes people go, hey, it gives people courage to be loud too. And that's what you have to do in these situations. You can't, lay low and try, hope that it goes away. It doesn't go away. It doesn't just go away on its own. Look at us 2 years later or a year later after Trump, we're still thinking it's gonna, it'll come back. Look at where it got us last year on January 6th. You stay like, oh, maybe it'll go away. No, it gets worse and worse and worse. I never imagined January 6th would ever happen in this country, And then as after the election happened, I went, oh, I know what's going to happen now. I put it online right after the election. I said, he is going to attack Congress. I remember writing that online. Like, just what's the most preposterous thing that would happen. I said, yeah, he's gonna try to figure out how to stop the counting of the votes, because that's what stubborn people do. And as I saw it happen, I'm like, yeah, that's what I thought was gonna happen. And what artists have is just like a lot of imagination. That's why they hire us to do like sets for fiction movies and stuff, because you sit around, you have nothing else to do, you don't really have a job to go to, so you go, what could possibly happen? Yeah, that's probably going to happen. And then you make pictures of it. And I had so many things that I thought were preposterous that 6 months later came true. And then I would show the image again. Look, I told you guys 6 months ago. Look, wow, it happened. So always imagine. I mean, look at Putin. Imagine the worst with this guy. They're all cut from the same cloth. It's the same idea, which is just this amazing stubbornness, a lot of machoism, a lot of they don't care about victims, so it's imagine the worst from these people, and you'll never be surprised.
Yes. Yes. I don't know who said that to me once. And it's sort of like a motto, but my husband's always saying, you shouldn't think like that. But I'm like, no, actually, it makes life better. Just thinking.
My wife thinks it's horrible for me to think like that, but it's true.
It must be then, I don't know. I think this is like an immigrant thing, because like you, I came here when I was 8, and it's like, oh, come on. Like, what else is next?
Yeah, I always imagine that you can be sent back.
Yeah. So it's so funny. I do want to say there's a quick comment that actually goes with what you were saying. It says, Lisa Richardson wrote, many times we were speechless and your images said, well, we couldn't find for words, which is so, it's everything that, again, we've all been thinking about right now, and thinking about how that's going to live, right? It's going to be there for a very long time. And it's going to live in the posters that you created, the book covers. And I do have one last question. I know we're a little bit over time, but I do want to get to this one. And this one is a question about your non-political work. So when doing a poster for an opera or cover for a book, how do you capture the extensive story so succinctly? And do you watch the opera or read the book first? Do you consult with producers about key themes? Can you tell us a little about that?
It depends on the topic. Sometimes I go into it like, oh, I'm going to look at all the costumes, et cetera, and then other times I'm like, I have the idea, I'm done. So it just depends. Sometimes I don't read the book at all. They sent me like a 2-paragraph synopsis, and as I'm reading a synopsis, I'm like, I have an idea, it's good, or I have 10 ideas. I start. I have a really hard time actually reading a book, because I think a little visually distracted. So I've gotten the book to do a book cover, and as I start reading it, I'm like, idea. And I can't even focus on the story, because I'm just looking at it for little bits and pieces. And the thing how I work with posters and book covers, and I try to get this across to my students, is you don't have to tell the whole story in an image. You don't have to. Actually, that actually ruins it. If the entire story is on the murder weapon is on the book cover, there's going to be a murder. So what I tend to do is I get a feeling, and it's really hard to teach feelings to students or to anyone. Feeling, and I'm fortunate in background, history, family, grandmother that kissed me too much, probably, where I'm very in touch with my feelings. So I just immediately get a feeling for something, and like a spiritual kind of thing. That I grew up with a lot of people, a mix of Santeria and Catholicism and all these. So all that imagery from religions and things is something that's sort of in my in my work in some way. But feeling the feeling of something is sometimes more important than showing you what it is. So like Things Fall Apart, that book cover just came to my head. Ooh, okay, things are upside down. Things are not what they're supposed to be for Africans, and that's what the book was about. I'm like, oh, a head upside down. These very simple ways of communicating come from feelings and not from reading an entire book. Because what happens when you read an entire book, you have so many things in your head that you're going to try to explain visually, and that can sometimes be too much, you know. So I tend to work more with little poetic little nuggets of information, and let the reader or the viewer kind of finish that sentence.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're going to end on that note. Edel, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. I see some clapping, so definitely thank you for sharing your work, your story. It's magnificent. Like I said, this is going to be on your YouTube page, which we're super excited about, because I know we'll return back, and I know professors will also share this with their students in classes. So we're super excited about that. Please take a moment to take a look through the wonderful comments on the chat right now. And I want to thank all of you for being here this evening for this virtual artist talk. Hopefully we can all be together in the same space in person soon. I'm really looking forward to that time. So check out our website, www.gtmuseum.org. Check out Edel Rodriguez's website as well. And also,
that's my book on the wall.
yes. So stay tuned for his
That
book.
should be coming out in the fall, and it's called Worm, WORM. That is what they called us when we were leaving Cuba, gusano, which means worm. And it's called Worm, a Cuban American Odyssey, Edel Rodriguez. So hopefully it'll be out this fall. If it gets delayed, maybe in the winter or something.
Great.
I have to finish it.
Well, you have my information, so please keep me posted. I'm happy to share that as soon as I receive it with everyone here, because I believe we have your emails.
Great, yeah.
So please share, keep in touch, and I'm sure we'll cross paths in some other way soon. And thank you again, all of you, for being here this evening. So it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.